Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders for coders about all aspects of creating your best life as a developer.
I'm Will, the accomplished developer and aspiring software architect.
And I'm Beej, the journeyman developer, sharing my journey in development.
Complete Developer Podcast is supported by listeners like you. We are now on Patreon at www.patreon.com/CompleteDeveloperPodcast.
Everyone likes to feel involved. Even the shyest introverts need a community, something to connect them with others like themselves. As developers, we can often feel isolated in our own little worlds of study or focus where we only have ourselves and our computers. Some people are able to find that community, whereas others don't see it and have to create the community they desire. We've brought on Saron Yitbarek, founder of CodeNewbie, to talk to us about creating an inclusive community and the conference that her team puts on each year for that community. But before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
I am done with the database nightmare that I have been living in.
Woot, woot.
Yeah. So I finished up the last of the really nasty chunks of SQL code this week. In fact, about 3 hours ago. And so, yeah, that saga is done. Hopefully there's no bugs. I don't ever want to look at this code again. Yeah, I can't express how happy I am to be done with this section of this project. It was a lot of learning. My SQL has gotten a lot better. But just like all other painful experiences in life, you grow from it and you don't want to be there again. And so that's that. So I'm very, very stoked about that. Other than that, the book is still coming along. It's looking like it's going to come out in August. So be on the lookout for an actual release date announcement fairly soon. That's all I got.
Awesome.
How about Saron?
What have I been fighting? Time or lack of time. It feels like there's just never enough time to do all the things I need to do. I'm gearing up for CodeLand right now, which is, as of the time of this recording, about 6 weeks away. So there's so many things, so many loose ends to tie up, so many people to get back to, so many tickets to sell. So just like a lot of work going on and trying to get it all done.
So we published episode 200 today. That was fun to edit. The content for the episode wasn't the trouble. We've gotten a lot better over the years. Going back through the old unedited episodes to pull the bloopers at the end was a lot of fun and kind of painful.
Yeah.
Will finished up SQL stuff this week. I've been in advanced SQL training all week long. I initially learned SQL using the Learn SQL the Hard Way. It was a group through the CodeNewbie organization that I met up with online.
Cool.
Yeah. But this class is very specific to PL SQL and Oracle. So I'm learning a lot of the little quirks there. And speaking of quirks, we're right in the middle of our book in Book OTs. So we are right in the middle of this book now. This is the meat of what it is to be a pragmatic programmer. We start this with a chapter about the basic tools. The comparison is made to a craftsman with a set of tools. As an artist, I recently saw a sale on brushes at Hobby Lobby. It was actually the brand that I use and was half off. So, of course, I splurged. I bought some of the paint. I bought some canvases. I went there to buy a single canvas, and I ended up spending a lot more than I intended, but half off. But what I splurged on were mostly very specific brushes or tools for painting. I already had the basic ones that I use in my paintings. These were some fine-tipped ones or specialty brushes designed for very specific things. And just like each brush has its own purpose and unique function, the tools that we use as developers have their own personalities and their own quirks, really. The next chapter gets into pragmatic paranoia. And this talks about things like dealing with other people's code and how developers shouldn't even trust their own code to work perfectly. The following 2 chapters talk about changes in your code, when to make them, and dealing with changes that can happen while you're coding. So not related to the code, but related to the business processes. The heart of being a pragmatic programmer is being prepared. And the core of the book breaks down ways to be better prepared for the things that happen during the development of a product. Will, who's talking to us this week?
Well, we got a tweet in response to you announcing that you're speaking at CodeLand from John Folder, saying, would love to hear this story. Had a change of careers myself because psychology wasn't healthy for me anymore, and being a coder is so much better.
John, thanks so much. I've been working on the talk this past week. Actually, Saron and I have a call tomorrow evening around this time to discuss it and discuss my slides. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be fun.
My friend Alicia, who is letting me use her art in my slides, and I've been texting back and forth all day long because she was sending me a bunch of artwork saying, all right, here, you can use this for this. And we're eventually going to get together, and I'm going to let her look through the presentation too to make sure that she agrees with me in where I'm placing things. But I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be awesome. So,
Very cool.
John, send us an email or a DM with your contact information, because we've got a Complete Developer water bottle just for you. Guys, if you'd like your very own Complete Developer water bottle, leave us a review in iTunes or comment on the website or any of our social media. We post all our episodes to Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram and Tumblr. Check us out each week on Facebook Live, where we talk about what's going on in the tech world and answer some listener questions. Or join the conversation anytime via Slack by going to slack.completedevelopernetwork.com.
We are social beings and live in a world where we thrive from working together. We have the capacity to learn from those that went before us and grow by guiding those behind us on the path. Sometimes it's easy to find the community you're seeking. When you start looking, they just seem to be everywhere. Other times, it can seem impossible to find anything. In those cases, you have the option to give up or to build the community that you want.
Saron is a developer and founder and CEO of CodeNewbie, the most supportive community of programmers and people learning to code. She is a regular contributor on several podcasts and hosts the CodeNewbie Podcast. She's had a few jobs in the tech world, including working for Microsoft managing a training program there. She's here to talk to us about building an inclusive community for developers and those learning to become developers. Well, Saron, we're big fans of origin stories here. And one of the things that I love to ask our guests is, what first got you interested in coding and learning about software development?
Sure. So what got me interested was reading the Steve Jobs book. I think that was 8 years ago now. Yeah, man, it's been a while. I read that book when I was just starting out, just about like a year, I think, after I graduated college. And I said to myself, this is really cool, like just this world of technology and being able to do things that were really creative and expressive and artistic, and all these things that I'd never really associated with technology. And I was really excited and really interested in seeing like if there was a place for me and if there was a role that I could have in this world of tech that I just recently discovered. And so that's kind of where the interest came from. And then the coding interest specifically came from just having experience working in the startup world and feeling like without being a developer myself, without getting those coding skills, that I would never be able to really make the impact I wanted to make. I felt like because I was non-technical, I wasn't really as valued as I wanted to be. You know, if you think about the different teams in a startup, like the engineering team is kind of the most important one, you know, like whether or not we want to admit it, like they're kind of the rock stars. They're the people who are, you know, just really prized and really core to the mission. And I really wanted to be on that team. I really wanted to play a big part in the companies that I worked for. And I felt like I needed to get technical in order to do that.
That's really awesome. When you did this, you created a community, and to get started, I want to ask, how do you define community?
That's a really good question. I think I define community as a group of people who are who have a goal in common, a mission in common. So for us, it's people who are like literally learning to code. It doesn't get more complicated than that. It's literally like we are on a mission to learn how to code, to hopefully be better developers, to be good developers, and probably something even more specific like getting a job at the end of learning how to code. So I think that being on the same mission, generally having the same values, for our community, inclusion and being inclusive is really important to us. Being supportive is really important to us. Being helpful, being like actively helpful is really important to us. So I think that it's being on the same mission, having the same mission, and then also having some shared values. That's how I define a community.
Nice. So is anybody not welcome? Have you ever had to ask anybody to leave?
Not explicitly. I think we haven't really had that many, but we've had maybe like 2 instances of someone who said something a little unsavory, in a Twitter chat or in a community or something. And when doing that, the community has kind of shut it down for me. So I haven't had to say anything. They've jumped in and said, no, that's not acceptable here. That's not okay here. So we haven't really had to kick anyone else out, but they have left due to peer pressure. Very welcome peer pressure from the community. So we're really good at self-moderating and having people who get what we're here for and get what we're about and make sure that everyone is behaving themselves.
That sounds similar to our experience as well. I know Beej and I've had a couple folks show up at our stuff that didn't need to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Of course, on that, our stuff started through CodeNewbie with Saron. Working with her, and then we sort of branched off into our own thing. So we've been friends for a couple of years now. So it's really cool. I know Will and I both have at times participated in different things. So what inspired you to create the CodeNewbie community?
It was just my own journey learning how to code. I felt like, I learned on my own for a few months. Then I went to the Flatiron School. I went to a coding boot camp in New York City. And the real value I got from that boot camp was the community of people. It was sitting in a room with 44 other people who understood the highs and the lows and who really understood the journey that I was going on. And so I didn't like the fact that in order to find that community, especially back then where there wasn't really, nowadays there are a lot of online communities available to support you, to help you out. But back then, there really wasn't much. And I didn't like the idea that you had to essentially like pay tens of thousands of dollars to get that community. I felt like you shouldn't have to pay that much. And so Twitter chats were a thing that everyone seemed to be doing. And Twitter chats, if you haven't been a part of one, is when you pick a hashtag. So for us, the hashtag is CodeNewbie. And we pick a time. So for us, it's Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then we'll pick a coding topic. And then each week, we will talk about a new topic and we'll tweet out questions during the hour. And then we'll have people respond using the same hashtag. So it's like an organized way to have a conversation with like 100 people on Twitter. So it's really cool. And so because this was such a popular thing back then, nowadays it's not, I haven't seen it too often, but it seemed like a really great tool to have everyone join the conversation and kind of create a community around that. So yeah, that's where that came from.
That's really cool. I know Will and I at various times have participated. I used to be more active in the Twitter chats, and that's really neat. Though I like that just sort of anybody can jump in. How do you pick the topics for that?
So they are usually inspired by the podcast episode that week. So if there's a topic that we had, for example, our season ender this most recently is about computer science, learning computer science. So I believe the topic we picked that week was related to, picking whether or not to study computer science in school and how important is this computer science degree. So usually it's related to the podcast. Otherwise, it's inspired just by like learning to code and just the coding journey itself, trying to think of different conversational topics, different things that people are already talking about on Twitter, different, hot topics that have come up or different arguments that have happened online, and trying to pick things that are relevant to our community. So it really helps that like we are also coders and we are also always learning how to code. So a lot of those topics come from just experiences we've had ourselves.
So the most recent thing that you've been working on for the community is the CodeLand conference.
Yes.
Could you tell us about the conference?
Sure. This conference is the most amazing conference ever. It is designed to explore the wonderful world of code. So a lot of tech conferences focus on the tools, the technologies, the languages. We focus more on the why. So it's not just, here's JavaScript, it's cool. It's here's what we're doing with JavaScript. Here's the application of this language. Here are the problems we're solving in our community, in our industry, at work. And so we really like to focus on the application of the technology. So to give you an example, we have a talk that is all about how to help rescue people who are part of like a natural disaster. And so it's like a natural disaster recovery program that was written by one of our speakers. And the idea is, if you're in a place where you had to deal with a natural disaster and you're trying to call for help, how do you do that? And how can we use drones to help us find people and figure out what they need? And he built this really amazing program to help solve that. So it's not about the program itself. It's not about the language he used to write it in. It's not about the APIs he used. It's about the fact that he has created something that could potentially save a lot of people's lives. So that's the part that's really interesting. That's what's really exciting. So it helps us illustrate the power of technology and the power of code. So that's what the conference is all about.
Nice. So who's the target market? I mean, is there any range of coding skill in there, or is it just wide open?
Sure, good question. So we design all of our talks and workshops to be applicable and interesting to really anyone, no matter what their background and experience is. But we've designed it specifically with the newbie in mind. So specifically folks who have less than a year or two of professional experience, folks who are just getting started, folks who are in the middle of their boot camp or trying to really self-teach, folks who are still looking for their first job. So we've really designed it around that. And what that means for us is making sure that our talks are not only cohesive and really interesting, but also making sure that each talk comes with a cheat sheet so that as someone is speaking on stage, there's a page in the program that lists all the terms and definitions that the speaker might use. It lists resources that might be helpful to look up later. And so really trying to think, if I'm a new developer, if I'm learning how to code, I'm sitting in the audience, what do I need to make me feel extra welcome, extra supportive? If it's my first tech conference ever, for a lot of folks, we're their first introduction to tech conferences. And so what do we need to do to make it really special, and how do we cater to them? So those are the things that make our conference a little bit better tailored for new developers.
What do people need to know coming into the conference?
So I think they need to know that it's going to be full of really amazing people who are there for them. I think that conferences are a really great place to network, to build community, to make some, friends in real life versus just like online friends. And so I think that coming in with an open mind is really good. An open heart is really good. I think that knowing that it is very much a technical conference, there will be code on the screens, there will be, terms and stuff that'll be talked about, but it's still going to be really accessible and approachable. So I think they just need to know that they will leave having learned something, and they will leave being inspired. Just being kind of open to receiving that information is really important.
I really like that, because when I first started, we went to a couple of conferences. They would have things that were listed as beginner, but
that were not.
Well, they were beginner if it was your first time working in that language or with that technology, but you had 5 to 10 years experience as a developer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's never new to coding. It's new to that particular topic with years of coding experience, which is very different.
You've talked about what people will have there. How is the conference set up? Because you were describing this to me before, and it sounds kind of unique. And I want the listeners to hear how, what their experience is going to be like while they're there.
Yeah, great question. So we start with the opening talk. So we have 2 amazing talks that are going to kick off the conference. And then from there, you get to pick the rest of the day. So you get to pick either track A or track B. Track A starts with talks in the morning and then a workshop in the afternoon. Track B is reverse. So track B is a workshop in the morning and then talks in the afternoon. And then we end with everyone joining in for our closing keynote. So it's an opportunity to kind of move around, get your blood flowing, walk around a little bit, get some get some activity in you, but also a way for you to kind of design the conference experience that you want. The workshops, about half the workshops are the same between the afternoon and the morning, but the rest are different. And the talks are different between the afternoon and the morning. So it really helps you kind of pick what are the things that you want to get out of the conference, what are the topics that are important to you, and gives you a chance to design your own conference experience.
I know one of the keynotes is going to be Scott Hanselman. And I know I got to meet him last year at Music City Tech, and he's a really great guy.
He's an amazing guy. Yeah.
He told me about some stuff, that kind of bleeding edge stuff that now my architect is going, hey, I need you to go learn this. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've already heard of it. I know about that.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, don't you love when that happens?
Yeah.
That's the best. Yeah.
And I'm going to be speaking there, but I know there's a different process for speaking at Codeland than other conferences.
Yes.
I guess, could you talk to us about who is asked to speak and that process of becoming a speaker there?
Sure. So the final program is made up of half invited speakers and half CFP speakers. So we do have a CFP. It was open, I think, for about like a month or so. And we had a couple hundred people apply. And then we picked, I don't remember how many we picked, but it was a very small amount. I think it was like under 10 people were invited to speak. So if you didn't get invited, please don't be upset. It was very hard. And it was very hard to pick the final lineup. And so, yeah, it was a mix of invited and mix of CFP. The invited speakers were either people that I had already seen speak before and I was very confident that they'd be able to speak to our audience. And they're also usually people who had a particular talk that I'd already seen before and that I knew would be a really good fit. So it's usually someone I was very comfortable with on stage and kind of knew they were going to do a great job. But for all of our speakers, regardless of whether or not they're invited, we go through a speaker training, speaker coaching process, which is frankly like my favorite part about doing the conference itself, is I get to work with each of our speakers, each of our workshop leaders, and we have 3 touch points. The first is where we talk about the talk outline or the workshop outline, and we kind of make sure we're on the same page with the information that we're going to share and how it's going to work and what the structure is going to look like. And then we have our slide review, which is all about making sure the slides are cohesive, that they are generally laid out well, that the talk is really coming together or the workshop is really coming together. And then the final touch point is the rehearsal. So that is actually running through and practicing, like according to time, like timing it and practicing what the actual talk is going to look like. And then I'll give some feedback and some notes on that. So it's my way of making sure that the speakers are really comfortable, that they feel confident about what they're going to say, how they're going to say it. And it's also a way of kind of doing, frankly, a little bit of quality control, of making sure that the talks aren't just great ideas, but are well executed. That's like a big thing, right? You look at an abstract and you think, oh, it's going to be a great talk. And then you go to the talk and then sometimes it falls flat, right? So we want to make sure that the talks sound good, they look good, and they actually are as good as they sound. So yeah, it's my favorite part, getting to work with each of our speakers. They're amazing. They're so excited to speak and share. And I know you're one of them, BJ, and you've been a pleasure to work with so far. And it's just a really great way for the speakers to get a benefit. They get some feedback, and our attendees get really great polished talks.
Yeah, this is the first conference I've spoken at that had anything like this, other than the ones where I knew the organizer and, he gave me some feedback, but that was after the talk. So getting this working together, for me, it's really great because I'm getting to, I had a couple of things in mind. And then when we talked that first time about the outline, you gave me some really great tips. I was like, you're right. It would be so much better if I just kind of forget about that and focus on this other area. And so I think it's going to be, and that's what led me to getting the art involved. And I think the talk is becoming so much more than it would have been had it just been me putting it together myself. So I like this process. Also, I've seen the other thing happen. It's happened to me where I had an idea that I thought was just a great idea, and I told it to an organizer at a different conference, and he was like, that sounds great. That sounds really awesome. Submit it. And when I submitted it, my abstract was horrible. The
opposite. Yep.
And I submitted a couple of talks. I picked a different one. So I go down there and he's like, hey man, I loved your idea. But when I read your abstract, I was like, man, that just sounds like a glorified sprint retrospective. And I was like, no, that's not it at all. He's like, yeah, I didn't think so. But my team, they read it and they're like, yeah, no, we don't want to hear that. And so I got some great feedback from that too. So, I think your process of giving feedback before the talk is really awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that because, it can be seen kind of like as extra work for the speakers. And I hope that's not how it comes off, but it's gotten really good reception. Like people are really excited to finally have some help on their talks and to get some really open and honest feedback. And it's been wonderful to see that they're really open and they're really collaborative too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's, as a speaker, and I think Will would probably agree with this because he's done some speaking too, it's hard to know if the idea in your head is going to go over well.
Yeah, it's really tough. Yeah. There are plenty. I mean, what you said about the abstract, I've definitely dealt with that myself where I'll think of like a really great idea, but it's just so hard to put that down, on paper and make it sound as interesting as it feels to you. So yeah, that's really tough.
So who can be a speaker? Like, I mean, I know you said about half of them are invited, but the other half are CFPs. Who do you get your call for papers from?
From a lot of folks. We have an incredibly diverse group of folks who apply. We get like tons of women, people of color, people who are in underrepresented groups come speak. And the other thing is I love that we have a ton of first-time speakers. We have a ton of folks who've never done a CFP before, or who've never spoken at a conference before. So we like to think that we've created a really safe place for you to feel like you have a voice and feel like you have a story to share. And hopefully that comes through in the CFP itself. Like if you look at our CFP, it's very different from others. Like a lot of people will just have you do an abstract, details, and that's kind of it. I don't think it's very helpful. I don't think it's helpful for the review committee, and I don't think it's helpful as a speaker because, well, there's so many different ways you can write an abstract. How do you know, how do you best get your idea across, especially if you're not used to writing abstracts, right? It becomes this thing where there's a way to write abstracts, and if you don't know that way, well, then you can't really get yourself out there. And so for us, our abstract or our CFP looks more like, what is your story? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? What are you optimizing for? What's your intention? So we try to get to the heart of what you're trying to say and the story you're trying to tell and let that be really explicit in the application. And then we try and review that instead of writing kind of this polished abstract that you have to create. We try and really get to like, what is this person really trying to say? And I think designing a CFP that way also makes more people comfortable submitting who may not be comfortable submitting a normal CFP.
Nice. So what it sounds like to me is you've taken this idea of the supportive community for people learning to code and put it into your speakers.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
I mean, I would suggest anyone that is wanting to get into speaking to next year submit to Codeland, because this process, it's helped me as a speaker, and I've been doing it for a couple of years now. I mean, I'm no great speaker, but it's definitely made me a better speaker.
Yay! I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, I think you really do well with the whole support thing. But what about people that maybe want to participate, but they don't want to speak? Are there other opportunities like mentoring, volunteering, those kind of things? We
do have volunteering as a thing that people can do. So, and we're going to put a call out closer to the conference date, but people are more than welcome to volunteer. We love our volunteers. They're a big part of how this conference is possible. Conferences are one of these things that you spend, for us, I think it's been like 9 months or so planning it and thinking about it. And at the end of the day, like, it's just different to have it come to life and just kind of realizing like, wow, there's a lot of people power required to make this actually happen. And so our volunteers are a big part of that people power. They're the ones who give you your swag bags, who take care of you, who lead you to the right place, who, make sure you're not lost, who make sure you're taken care of. So we love our volunteers, and that's probably the biggest way that you can contribute to the conference. We also have pay it forward tickets. So one of the things that we realized is that there are a lot of folks who may not be able to attend Codeland, or who, for different reasons just don't feel like it's a good fit for them. Maybe they're way too senior, and we have them still wanting to participate, still wanting to give back to the community. And so we designed these pay it forward tickets, which basically allows them to pay for one of our scholars to attend the conference. So we have an opportunity scholarship for folks who may not be able to afford going to the conference, and that gives them a heavily subsidized ticket for just $25. And so the pay it forward ticket allows someone to basically pay that, to pay for one of these scholarship tickets. So it's been a really great way for people to give back to the community and help support the people who want to go to Codeland.
Nice. So, what are some of the best parts of previous conferences? I mean, you've got all these systems around trying to create a great conference. What are some examples of some stuff that you've seen in previous ones that really stood out?
Yeah, it's been really awesome to see people use the booklet I talked about. So our booklet, I think technically it's a program, but it doesn't look like a normal program. It's full of resources and terms and definitions and all this really great information that can be used even after the conference is over. So instead of a t-shirt, you get like a book of knowledge, which is, I think more valuable. But I wasn't sure, frankly, if people were actually going to use it. I wasn't sure if the idea I had in my head was going to play out that way. But it did. Like, it was really cool to watch people in the audience take out their pens, take notes during the notes section, jot things down, really looking and using it as the talks were happening. That was just really cool. So that idea worked out pretty well. I think for me, one of my favorite moments about the conference is at the end of the conference, and this was not something that I organized, but this just happened because our volunteers are so amazing. They created this runway where they would clap for you as you exited and as you left the conference. And it was this really amazing, totally organic way of celebrating you, right? Like, we're literally celebrating you as you leave. It's the last thing that happens at the conference. It's like you're walking out and you're being clapped and whooped, and we're your hype man, for the minute it takes for you to leave the conference. And that is one of my favorite things, is being able to create that final experience, that final touch point where you just feel awesome leaving the conference.
That sounds awesome. I can't wait to be there. And this sounds bad, but I can't wait to leave now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges that you faced when putting on the conference?
Oh, there are so many. I think what makes the conference, or any conference, really hard, at least for me, is that there are so many little details. There are just so many little things. And the big things are pretty doable or pretty easy because they're big, right? They're in your face. You got to have the program. You got to have a website. You got to have a ticketing system. Those things are pretty manageable, but there's so many little things that can slip through the cracks. So, for example, one of my worst fears is, you book hotels for all the speakers, and then you'll have one speaker email you and say, hey, I'm actually going to come in a day before, and I need to make sure my hotel is reserved for the day before. So that's something that is, a pretty small detail when you compare it to your list of a million things you have to do, but for that speaker is a really big deal, right? Like, if you forget to update that booking, well, then your speaker is out for the night and doesn't have a place to sleep, literally. So that's a really big deal. So for me, it's those seemingly small things that are actually really consequential. That's the hardest part about a conference, is keeping track of all those little changes, those one-offs, those customized things that need to happen, and just making sure you're on top of it and you have done all the work you need to do. Even if it feels small to you, it's actually really important to a lot of people.
Nice. So how many people does it usually take, and how many hours does it take to stand up a conference like this? I mean,
good question. Yeah, the first year it was all me. It was me, and I have help every year from committees. So we have a program committee that reviews the talks. We have the volunteer group that I mentioned who helps the day of the conference, and we have the opportunity scholarship committee that helps review the scholarship applications. So I'm really happy to have an amazing network of people who've been really supportive in these kind of contained projects. But the bulk of the work was done entirely by myself the first year. The second year I had help, so it was me and one other part-time person. And this year I have the pleasure of working with Abby Phoenix, who is the woman behind RailsConf and RubyConf. She is, oh my goodness, she's my conference angel. She's amazing. And this year she's been able to take on a lot of the stuff that, frankly, I don't like to do. She's the one that's been in charge of working with the venue, booking catering, booking hotels, kind of those logistical details that, frankly, are not really my strong suit. And she's been able to take on a lot of that. So it's been mostly she and I for this conference for this year.
Yeah, I found I've never put on a conference like this, but just working on other things with school and stuff, having someone who is good at logistics makes the difference.
Such a big difference. Yeah, there's so many things that are like, it allows me to focus on the things that I'm good at. It allows me to pay attention to the speakers and pay attention to the program and kind of crafting the experience of the conference. And it's a joy to work with someone who genuinely loves the things that you hate doing. She loves spreadsheets. She's amazing at spreadsheets. I'm in awe of the spreadsheet she's created for us. But she's really good at it and she really likes doing it. So yeah, it's been a great experience working with her.
Those kind of people are great because
they're so good.
I try to stay out of Excel just personally. The only use I have for it that seems to wrap me up is periodically using it for code generation, which I feel like a horrible person for doing that. But sometimes,
no judgment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No judgment is how you get there. I guess now let's talk a little bit about what other opportunities does the CodeNewbie community offer. I mean, we talked about the Twitter chat and the conference, but what else do you have?
Yeah, we also have the podcast that we do. So we've been doing our show for 3, maybe 4 years. Oh my God, I think it's been almost 4 years now. It's been great. We get to interview a bunch of folks who are new to coding, who are super experienced in coding. And it's been a really great opportunity to showcase all the different ways you can get into code and all the different things you can do with code. So we have some technical episodes that talk about like accessibility, for example, intro to accessibility. We have one on security. What should you know about security as a developer? We have one about progressive web apps. Like, what is that and why should I care? So we have really technical topics, and then we have more stories. So kind of like interviews like this, where we bring someone on and we say, how did you learn to code? Where did that interest come from? What was the hardest part about it? What was the easiest part about it? And we just kind of dig into these journeys of different developers. So that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of is that podcast and being able to share that with so many people.
Yeah, I think you've been doing it maybe a few months longer than we have, and I listened to the CodeNewbie podcast before we started podcasting. And that's how we found out about the event down in Atlanta where we came down and met you for the first time.
Yeah,
was through the podcast. So yeah.
Good times.
You have another podcast as well?
Yeah, we have one more called the Base CS Podcast. That's with myself and my co-host, Vaidehi Joshi. She is an amazing programmer and a brilliant writer. And so for a year, she does not have a computer science degree. I think she majored in English, if I remember that correctly. And so she wanted to learn computer science, and so she decided she was going to teach herself. So every week for a year, she wrote about a computer science topic. She read lots of like books and other blog posts, watched videos, and then she would write these amazing, really simple, really easy to understand blog posts every week for a year. And I saw that, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, this would make such a good podcast. Mm-hmm. And so we've been able to translate her blog posts into short 20-minute episodes where we teach computer science.
Oh, I need to do that.
Yeah.
It's really good. Yeah, it's a really good show. I love that show. And I get to spend time with her, so it's fun.
That's awesome. That's one of the things that Will and I talked about a couple weeks ago in our retrospective on 200 episodes was the way that our friendship, now we've been friends since college, but the way that our friendship has grown so much seeing each other every week. Podcasting, and it's amazing the interactions and the way that I can tell when he's getting frustrated at me, or he can tell when I'm getting annoyed at something he said, and
or he's about to make a smart aleck comment. His right eyebrow, well, it's actually his left, but it's right on the screen, will go up slightly. Like an eighth of an inch. I'll see it and I'm like, oh, here it comes. Just stop talking.
Yep. So getting back to talking about the community and building this, I think it's really amazing because Will and I were talking the other day about how we've kind of got our little tribe here in Nashville of friends that we've made because of podcasting, because of being involved in the development community locally. we have faced some challenges just in our little circle. What challenges have you faced and have you overcome with building this supportive community for developers?
That's a good question. I think one of the hard things that continues to be, frankly, a little difficult is very simply that we don't have a destination. We don't have an online home for CodeNewbie. We have a bunch of places where we exist on other people's platforms, right? So we have our Twitter account, which is obviously on Twitter, and that's where we host our Twitter chats. We have the podcast, which is just an RSS feed, right? If you really think about it, like I don't have an app for the podcast. It's on someone else's app that you're listening to. We do have a Slack channel, but even that's on Slack, and Slack channel community is always a little tricky. We have our Facebook group, again, that's on Facebook. So we have decided to be in locations where we're going to find people, but as a result, we don't have a place for people to go to, So one of the things that we've been dealing with is just figuring out how do we reach all of our people, right? If we said, okay, we want to send out a message, whether it's about Codeland or whatever it is, how do we go to all these people? So we have to go to all these different channels to make sure that, and make sure we have a consistent message to reach everyone who is part of our community. So that's one of the things that's been a little hard and kind of tricky to deal with.
That makes sense. I remember in college, we had this sort of writers community that met at a coffee shop, and having that physical location, you could go in there and you could just be like, you could put something on the sticker board or tell someone that worked there, and it would get to all the people. So yeah, that I completely see that. Now I know we talked when you're talking about the Twitter chats about and about like people having to like the community sort of self-regulating, but have you had detractors from what you're trying to do? And have you ever had to deal with jealous people or people that don't want to see you succeed with it?
If they exist, I don't know about them. I think the good thing about what we're trying to do is that we're full of like love, like we're full of love and niceness, and we're very open and inclusive. So it's kind of hard to be upset about that, like what are you upset about? That we want to help people, you know what I mean? Like it's just like it's not an easy thing to hate on. So I don't really, if that's happened, I am not aware of it. I know that other people have popped up with their own organizations and their own communities, which is wonderful to see. The idea that there's not just one place for people to go, but there's multiple options for people to kind of find their own community, I think is a wonderful thing. So overall, no, we haven't had any issues, nothing to complain about.
That's wonderful. I mean, talking about other people popping up, what you are doing definitely inspired us a lot in our local meetup that we run.
Yeah, I mean, Saron is kind of like the Johnny Appleseed of local developer meetups.
Yeah, I'll take it.
She just goes around throwing seeds out there to see what happens. Yeah,
I like that.
The last thing I want to talk about is, do people either, I don't want to say age out, that's not the right term, but graduate. Yes, that's good. Yeah. Or kind of grow out of the community, or do they stick around once they've moved beyond the newbie phase?
That's a great question. I think that it's a little bit of both. So we have folks who might graduate, once they got their first job, or maybe got their first promotion. They'll do their thing for a while, maybe a year or two, and then they'll come back. They'll almost always come back to say, hey, I'm ready to now be a mentor. I'm ready to finally answer all the questions that maybe I had when I first started out. So we always have folks who want to pay it forward. And that's like probably my favorite thing about our community is even the people who need mentorship also want to mentor. We actually had this interesting problem a couple years ago. We were thinking about how to do a mentorship program and what that would even look like. And we did a survey where we asked people, hey, do you want mentorship or do you want to mentor? And almost everyone said both, which made it like really hard to pair people up, if everyone's like, I can do both. But it was really interesting to see that even though you might be new to coding, you might not be new to speaking, right? You might not be new to podcasting. You might be new to learning how to code or maybe being a JavaScript developer, but you're not new to front end, right? Or you're not new to managing people. And so it's been really interesting to see that even when you're new at learning to code a specific thing, you can still be an expert in some other category. And a lot of people in our community are definitely very helpful and very willing to extend that knowledge and make sure that we're all growing together.
Very cool. I mean, we've noted that with our groups that we do have a lot of growth outward, and I think that's something that would probably help us is if we had those people coming back in to mentor. It seems like you've kind of got a pretty good ecosystem building there.
Yep, absolutely.
What is the path for that? Like you talked about sending that out, but do you have a set path? Because one thing I really like about what you do is everything seems to have a you're really well organized. And like you're well organized in the areas that we are not. And so I think that's where I notice it the most.
Interesting. Yeah.
But do you have a path for that like people go out and when they come back and they say, "Hey, I've been in the job for a year or two. I'd like to help out." Do you have something for them to do? How does that work for them?
Usually people will tweet at us and they'll tweet us specific questions. So it might be specific to a bug they're facing or a big decision they're making in their coding journey. And so when people DM us or tweet at us, we rarely, if ever, actually answer the question. What we do is we retweet it and we say to them, tweet it at us, we'll retweet it, and we'll get the community involved. So the biggest way to do to help out in our community is kind of through this almost like a crowd mentorship, if you think of it that way, kind of putting this opportunity out there and kind of letting anyone who has an opinion, who has some experience, join in and kind of give their 2 cents and provide some advice, provide some possible solutions. So that's probably been the most helpful way that people can give back and share some of their knowledge and experience.
I like that idea. I need to spend more time on Twitter. I've kind of gotten away from it, but
yeah, man, Twitter's where it's at. Come on, BJ.
Yeah, I'm on there pretty rarely as well. It's hard for me to keep up with Twitter. I mean, like, what are you doing to be able to do that while having a full-time, other occupation other than looking at Twitter?
Well, the way I solve that is I have someone who does our social media.
Okay. Oh, nice.
So yeah, she's amazing. She's been with us just for a few months now. But she has been the one that makes sure the community is happy and well run and making sure that, they have what they need and they're taken care of. So I still do some of the Twitter chats. She's actually been doing a couple of them as well. But I have someone, it got to a point where I was like, there's just too much going on. And in order to stay organized, I need to start delegating. So I have someone who manages a lot of that stuff for me.
Yeah, we're getting to that point too. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Guys, it is built into our very nature to desire to be a part of something larger than ourselves. We want to be connected to others doing similar things and with similar mindsets and interests. Many times you can find that by putting yourself out there and searching. There's a lot of stuff, especially online. Other times, though, you have to create the community you desire. And Saron has been great about sharing her story on creating the community that she built and the amazing things that they're doing in that community. Saron, we really want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your insights. How can people reach out to you and find out more about Codeland and all the other things that CodeNewbie is doing?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. So to reach out to me, you can reach me on Twitter. It's just my full name, Saron Yitbarek, SaronYitbarek. And then if you want to learn more about Codeland specifically, go to codelandconf.com. Tickets are still available. Ticket prices are going up June 22nd. So hopefully you'll be able to get your tickets before then. And then last but not least, if you want to learn more about CodeNewbie, I think following us on Twitter is probably the best thing to do. Our Twitter handle is @CodeNewbies, CodeNewbies.
And I'll have links to all of that in the show notes for you guys. That pretty much wraps us up. Before we close everything out, Will, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
Well, I want to reiterate something that I think is kind of under the surface here, and that is that if you want to predict the future, if you want to predict how you're going to move forward, you create that. That's what Saron has done with her community. That's what we've done with our community. That's what most people that are successful and don't have a ready-made community end up doing. If you step out of your comfort zone and you force yourself to go out there and accrete all the people that will help you, you'll get a whole lot further than you will actually just trying to find those people. In other words, attract them, create the kind of scenario where they will come in and then they'll be there. And I just want to reiterate that point again. That's all I got.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment, please email us at neckbeards@CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed through Creative Commons.
The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up for weekly emails with extra tips and insights, be sure to check out the website at CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with news about the show. Catch us each week as we broadcast live, talking about what's going on in the tech world and answering listener questions.
Learn more about all of our shows and groups by going to CompleteDeveloperNetwork.com, where you'll find links to Junior Developer Toolbox, Developer Launchpad, and our other communities. Thanks for listening. See you next time.